Ми багато зробили для того, щоб українські повітряні сили перейшли на новий стандарт авіації. Тепер це дійсно реальність у нашому небі. F-16 в Україні.
Hi to all! Today I have on my desk a model from my wish list that has been there for a long time. This is the plane that my whole country has been waiting for more than 2 years. Children and adults, old and young, everyone knows what kind of plane it is, and everyone wanted to see it in the Ukrainian sky. This day has come. On August 4th, 2024, the premiere of the F-16 of the Ukrainian Air Force. What kept me from assembling the model earlier? I did not know exactly which modifications and from which countries the F-16 would arrive. Earlier, even before the full-scale invasion of Russia, I fantasized about the F-16 on Ukrainian service. A video of the assembly of the model in blue pixel in the 70-second scale on my channel. But the war changed everything, and the transfer of these planes was only a matter of time. I decided to wait for the real F-16s and build something realistic in my favorite 48th scale. That's how the F-16AM model from Kinetic appeared in my hands. This is exactly the MLU modification that I need. Since I will build an aircraft transferred from Denmark under the former aircraft number E599, now 3599 of the Air Force of Ukraine. And I will start the assembly not from the cockpit as usual, but from the air intake of the model, in which there are visible traces of pushers of the molds, and they need to be removed with the help of putty. I putty, clean, glue, process the joining of parts and paint, everything as usual. Also at the same time I paint the first fan of the jet engine and assemble the wheelbase. During this time, I will tell you where the F-16s came from in Europe, which were later transferred to Ukraine. For European countries, the Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark and Norway were part of the APG European Consortium and showed an active interest in the F-16 fighter. Back in the distant 70s, when it was just undergoing factory tests under the LWF program, these 4 countries became its first operator after the United States, placing an order for 348 fighters in 1975. Later, in 1977, 2 factories were launched in the Netherlands and Belgium for independent assembly of 16 in Europe. Accordingly, all initially ordered aircraft and additional sides were produced between 1977 and 1992, with the bulk of fighters for Norway produced before the beginning of 1985 due to a relatively small order for these countries. The Dutch and Belgian machines were in production the longest due to the expansion of their original option to 213 and 180 units. All the machines produced in these countries belong to the first version of the F-16A and B fighter, that is, a single-seat and B two-seater. In total, a rather impressive number of F-16s were produced at European factories in the amount of 537 units. However, not all of these machines are still in service and available. As part of extending the life cycle and combat relevance of their fighter fleet, European countries jointly with the United States developed a corresponding program, Midlife Update or shortened MLU. In total, the most recent of the previously produced F-16A and B Block 10 and Block 15 were selected for modernization, a total of 223 fighters for 4 European countries. The entire fleet was not modernized due to the disappearance of a potential threat in the form of the Soviet Union, and a general trend towards igniting and saving money. Historical fighters before the upgrade underwent a program of repair of the airframes, and also the service life of the aircraft after repair was brought up to 5,000 hours. The updated fighters began to enter the troops in 1996 under the designation F-16AM MLU. The main modernization scope included the replacement of the Pratt & Whitney F100 PW220 engines with its next version F100 PW220. The new engine has a slightly reduced maximum thrust, much higher dynamics and reliability for the possibility of hanging additional targeting and navigation units. The next step is to assemble the vertical stabilizer. Since the model from Kinetic includes several options from different European countries, they differ greatly in terms of equipment on the vertical stabilizer. I am interested in the Danish version, and the instructions perfectly describe exactly what parts are needed to assemble the modification of the Danish Air Force. The main thing is to carefully follow the instructions to avoid assembly errors. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video, thanks. Also, at the beginning of the assembly, I decided to assemble the resin nozzle in order to make sure that it will take its place without modifications before assembling the parts of the aircraft body. I would not want to do this on an assembled and painted model. I decided to replace the jet nozzle with the resin one, because the plastic from the kit looks quite primitive and has simplified detailing. A set from Resin. Why? And not something else? Good price and constant availability in my country. And this is the main factor why I chose it. Due to the war in my country, there is no need to wait weeks for delivery of Aries or Edouard, which I also love and often use in my models. And it is also a support of the native producers, which works and develops under the aggression of Russia, and my money stays in my country, which is good for the economy. Yes, res kit sets are not perfect. Very often there are inaccuracies and shortages. But their product line has a lot of things that others don't. Also a line of 3D decals for model cockpits, which I will also use for this model, vinyl stands for models. And at the moment the manufacturer is actively switching to 3D printing of add-on parts, producing new sets and replacing the old ones that were cast only from resin. To paint the resin, I used a line of metallic paints and a black gloss primer from Alclad 2. I painted white in the middle of the jet nozzle, and then simulated burning in the middle with black pigments and a brush. When painting, I looked at a lot of photos and tried to achieve the most realistic result by combining different colors and applying several layers. Something else interesting. The peculiarity of Danish machines, which interests me now, is the initial refusal to upgrade their engines to the 220 version. This was done in the hope of saving money and updating the country's fighter fleet before the F-16 engines finally exhausted their service life. But various delays forced the Danes in 2013 to spend money on buying 50 used F-100 PW220E engines. This was done in order to extend the operational life of the fighter until 2024, until the newest F-35s enter service. Before assembling the parts of the fuselage of the model, it remained only to assemble the cockpit. As it was said before, I will use 3D decals. Before applying them, you need to remove all the relief that imitates all the switches on the surface of the cockpit panels. And also paint the parts in the main color, choosing the one that is as similar as possible to what is on the 3D decals. I use blue tack to fix the parts for painting. This special mass is very similar to plasticine, but unlike it, it does not leave greasy traces after removing the mass from the surface and has a very good adhesive effect that can withstand a lot of weight. And before painting, I glue the pedals, the airplane control handle and the engine control handle. Next, painting in a blue color, which I will mix on the decals myself, and the black color in the upper part using just a black matte primer. After painting, traces of paint often remain on the work surface. I like to keep the workplace clean, so I always try to remove the paint immediately, Tested by time and experiments, isopropyl alcohol best removes most model paints without damaging the surface of the model rug. But there is also a strong smell of alcohol that harms the lungs. Good ventilation of the room will help to get rid of the smell. Next, 3D decals. This time I managed to purchase a set from Eduard of their Space line. As it turned out, Eduard also has a shortage, which is confirmed by this mess on the side surface. The set also includes photo-etched seat belts. The decals themselves are printed quite well. They also lay well on the plastic, but in some places they had to be trimmed a little. After the standard gluing of decals on Ultra Glue from MMAG, I still paint some small things and can glue the cockpit to the upper part of the model. A little more about the prototype and its cockpit. It is important to pay attention to the design changes in the MLU modernization kit as a cockpit of these machines. The fighter's cockpit has been significantly updated, as well as its internal electronics. In the updated workplace, the pilot could operate two multifunctional displays as well as a wide-angle indicator on the windshield. In addition, the cabin was adapted for the use of night vision goggles. For navigation, the machine was equipped with GPS receivers as well as a digital terrain detection system (DTS), which helps the pilot in low-altitude flight by displaying relevant information on the indicator on the windshield. Everything is ready for assembling the fuselage. The halves fit together well, there are no offsets or visible gaps. True, there is a slight deformation of the lower part, due to which the halves do not lie tightly against each other. But this is not a problem of ice, and paper tape will help. In the nose part, to avoid deformation from compression, I inserted the base of the radar. I will not glue the radar itself, it will not be visible under the cone. I clean the joints and finish them with putty in those places where the seam will be visible. And then I continue to assemble the aircraft body by gluing various parts. Almost did not forget to make holes on the side panels near the nose. This is another feature of the Danish F-16. These versions are equipped with special side searchlights for night recognition and identification of border violators. The same searchlights are installed on the F-16ADF version of the US and Canadian Air Forces. After picking up the drill and making the holes, it's time to test the tool for making self-made round paper masking masks. One of the nuances of use is that on the millimeter scale on the tool, you need to set half of the required diameter. Also, I misadjusted the blade and it cut my model rug. Now these circles on the mat are with me for a long time. And the most interesting thing is that I have Eduard painting masks for transparent parts, and as it turned out later in the set there are masks for these spotlights. Nothing, it was the first acquaintance and training with the instrument. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks. To imitate the reflector of the projector's deflector, I paint it with a Molotov chrome marker on the reverse side and stick the spotlight on Ultra Glue. During the assembly of the F-16AM MLU, you must carefully follow the instructions, since the model is universal for many different modifications. So there are things that need to be removed from the fuselage. And I would also advise you to check the photos of the prototype of the aircraft you are building. The nose cone, or radio transparent cap, consists of two halves. but to my surprise, it fitted extremely well and required no additional work, only minor sanding. Before gluing the canopy, install the pre-assembled and painted visor of the instrument panel with the windshield indicator and the pilot's seat. Unfortunately, not all model manufacturers have learned how to cast canopy of a complex shape without visible seams. Kinetic is no exception. This is not a problem and is solved in a very short period of time. First, with a sharp blade, I scrape off the very seam that protrudes above the surface of the transparent plastic, then gradually roll the surface with sandpaper from 400 to 2500. And at the very end, the magical finishing paste from Tamiya works wonders. First, I apply and roast it on the surface of the entire canopy, after which I polish the entire surface with a Dremel and a felt nozzle at low speeds. As you know, the F-16 canopy is not transparent, it is slightly darkened with a slight rainbow effect. The effect of overflowing colors is not easy to repeat, but I decided to try it with blackout. Somewhere, I don't remember where, I saw tinting of transparent parts with medical iodine. In this case, I decided to dissolve iodine in future floor varnish, which is often used by modelers as a glossy varnish or to restore transparent parts of models and additionally a protective layer against scratches. Once upon a time, I bought 100 milliliters separately and stored them in jars like these from glossy varnish. First, I decided to experiment on the Canopy 2-seater version that comes with the kit. I found the remains of the old iodine in the first aid kit, added about 2 milliliters to 40 milliliters of future, mixed it well and immersed the canopy in half so that after drying the result was visible and left it for 24 hours until it was completely dry. The next day I checked the result, but my biggest surprise was when I looked into the jar with Futura. The color I added completely disappeared and Futura became transparent again. The result did not satisfy me, so I decided to add 5 milliliters of iodine and repeated the bathing procedure. The next day, magic is again absolutely transparent. Now it's time for the main canopy. 5 milliliters was too much, so I only added 3. After immersing in Future, I put the canopy in an airtight box to dry to prevent dust. 24 hours of drying and I was completely satisfied with the result. Now canopy can be glued and masked with paint masks. And yes, Future has become transparent again. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thanks. Also, before painting, I assembled the chassis struts but not glue them to the model for ease of further painting of the wheelbase and the chassis struts. According to the classics, before painting, I apply Mr. Primer Finishing Surfacer 1500 Gray with a thin layer. This is my favorite primer that dries quickly and perfectly evens out the surface, hiding all the sins. I chose the gray color because it is more neutral. For painting with light tones on dark primers, to cover it, you need to put a very thick layer of paint that can hide the already thin lines of the panels. Although the coloring scheme of this aircraft is not difficult, there was a problem with the colors. All 3 colors are referenced in the instructions to the paint number according to the federal standard and, in parallel, to the corresponding color available from model paint manufacturers. According to the instructions, federal standard number 26373 should be used for the lower part, and the paint is offered by the manufacturer Ammo MIG under number 212 Silver Gray. I have this paint, and in my opinion, after a detailed study of real photos of Danish planes, this color is not suitable. I decided to highlight it a little, which in my opinion is more true. It turned out to be not so easy to paint gray by gray. Next, according to the scheme, I paint from light to dark. Gray-blue color applied to the side surfaces, vertical stabilizer, horizontal stabilizers on the upper surface, and the front part of the upper surface of the fuselage. The instructions give the Federal Standard 26270, but the model paint according to Humbrol number 126 US Med Gray. Such paint is not available in our stores. Therefore, I mixed the color myself, and in my opinion it turned out quite similar. The next third darkest and last livery color according to the Federal Standard is number 26132, but no model paint manufacturer is specified. I look at the photo and do it myself. I have a set of paints from Vallejo for modern US aviation. It was with the help of these paints that I created the color myself. After the first layer and complete drying, the color turned out to be lighter than I expected, so darkening it a little. I applied a second layer, not completely filling the surface, but using the post-shading method to highlight the panels on the main half of the fuselage. Thanks to this case, the final result turned out better than I expected. I did not plan any aging or weathering of the model, as in all the photos and videos available at the moment. The F-16 arrived in Ukraine in excellent condition with no visible signs of use. Now I am completely satisfied with the result. Also painted the transition of colors on the vertical stabilizer, which is typical for Danish aircraft. A thin dark gray strip at the bottom of the stabilizer. After painting the main colors, he took up the nasal radio-transparent cone, the color of which was also selected independently, and the black outline around the canopy. And in the end, all that remained was to paint the wheels baize white. Also, before applying the varnish, I practiced painting various equipment, wires and hoses inside the wheels baize with a brush by looking at many photos of real planes. A day later, after the paint has completely dried, I cover the model with Tamiya X22 glossy varnish, which prepares the surface for applying decals. And while the varnish dries, I paint the wheels. Black rubber color and white middle metal part, masking the painted parts with proprietary paint masks from Edouard. After the paint dried, I painted all the necessary parts of the wheels with the 0.3mm Molotov black liner marker. After that, I covered the wheels with a transparent glossy varnish and prepared them for wash. Decals. And here is the real epic. At the time of assembly of this model, there are no decals on the Ukrainian F-16. Therefore, I pre-purchased a set from Dan Models in 72 scale for the Ukrainian Air Force with the hope that the insignia would fit in size. And also decals from a manufacturer previously unknown to me with numbers and letters of the US Air Force in various sizes. I will use all the technical stencils from the set for the Danish F-16, as the instructions will help me. The most difficult thing was gluing the strips. During work, it seemed to me that it was easier to paint them, but the thickness on such a scale is very small. All stencils have not changed at all, looking at the photos of real planes that have arrived in Ukraine and fully correspond to the decals that are included with the model. After transferring all the stencils, I started with the identification marks. There were no problems with the yellow-blue rondelles on the wings, but there was a problem with the trident on the vertical stabilizer. In order to choose its size, I adjusted the photo to the size of the vertical stabilizer of the model and measured the size of the trident I needed. As it turned out, neither the decals of the 72nd nor the decals of the 48th tridents were suitable in size. After searching in my old stocks, I found a decal that I had with me since 2005. This is the Su-27 decal from Revell in the 72nd scale. The size of the trident was perfect. But the decal is old and I was afraid that it was no longer suitable. But the German quality did not disappoint, and the trident was perfectly adapted to the model. The set from microscale is also probably not the first freshness. The lining of the decals turned yellow and I was afraid that it would be visible on the model. But I have no alternative. And I also noticed that the decals have a very thick backing, which is clearly visible after transferring the decals to the model. And as it turned out, it is not easy to apply each number and letter separately. It took a lot of time. By the way, the yellow lining is not visible on the model and I was satisfied with the result. After applying the decals, I covered the model with another, now thick, layer of glossy Tamiya varnish to protect the decals from further possible damage and leave the model for several days, allowing the varnish to dry well. One of the final steps of assembling the model is, of course, wash. This time I decided to move away from the classic Tamiya or AK washes that I have been using lately. This time I did the wash liquid by myself with Ammo MIG oil brusher oil paints. The three main colors of the livery will have different washes according to the shade. This time I don't want the panel lines to be highlighted too much. Oil paints are diluted with a solvent to a fairly liquid state and applied to the model with brush. Friends, I want to tell you that I recently created an account on the Patreon platform. By purchasing a subscription to it, you will support my creativity for uninterrupted content creation and stimulate me to continue working. Also, the YouTube sponsorship feature helps me too. Thank you for your support. After waiting 10 to 15 minutes, I wipe off the excess with a normal napkin. I did not do any more weathering on the model. When the washing is complete, I attach a few more parts to the model and prepare to cover the model with a final layer of satin varnish. This time it is varnish from AK. I dilute it with a proprietary solvent to a very liquid state. I cover the model with a thin layer and leave it to dry for several hours. The varnish has hardened, the masks are removed, the model is ready for final assembly. What about weapons? According to the photos of the Ukrainian F-16s, I have only seen air-to-air missiles so far. This is the new version of the AIM-120M with 3D printing from Resin. The AIM-9M Sidewinder is also of high quality with protective caps. And 370-gallon wing fuel tanks. Unfortunately, at the time of assembly, I did not find fixxxet MWS pylons, which are typical for the Danish Air Force, anywhere, so I will leave the standard ones that were in the set. During the final editing of the video, fixxxet MWS decals and pylons for the Ukrainian Air Force from Rush model kits also appeared on sale in Ukraine. I bought them and will upgrade my model in the near future. It's good that I made hanging weapons on magnets and the pylons can be easily replaced. A few steps remain before the model is finished. Painted the static current drains on the wings and vertical and horizontal stabilizers. I install a jet nozzle, glue wheels, lower ridges, wheel bays, and much more. The build has come to an end. I hope you liked the video and the final result. Don't forget to like the video. Be sure to drop me a comment with tips for understanding my mistakes and what you would change in this build. I want to remind you about my Patreon and sponsorship on YouTube. This is an extraordinary support for me and my channel. Also subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. See you in the next videos.